grab your coat and get your hat. Leave your worry on the doorstep. Just direct your feet to the sunny side of the street. Can't you hear a pitter-pat? And that happy tune is your step. Life can be so sweet on the sunny, sunny, sunny side of the street.
Hi, welcome to another Sunny Side of the Street. I'm your host, Todd Gross, a clinical psychologist and director of Adams Street Associates in Newton. And we are glad to be back in the studio again and with a wonderful guest I'm going to tell you about. You know that our show, The Sunny Side of the Street, for about 20 years now, has been really focusing on the side of human nature that is often ignored in the media, the positive side. People and organizations that are doing things to help other people, people who overcome odds. And I think part of the sunny side of the street is looking at some of the amazing ways that people help each other and help themselves, and then also how they deal with adversity. And so that is a part of it, because usually that reveals a lot of courageous challenges that they face and methods of healing as well. So one of the areas that face a lot of people is disturbed sleep, sometimes nightmares, and many times nightmares that are connected to post-traumatic stress as well. So today we're very fortunate to have a wonderful guest back for her second time, and we're glad for that. She's a psychotherapist who's written a book, which you can see here, PTS Dreams. It shows how to turn PTS dreams into opportunities for personal growth and healing. Using the GAIA method, G-A-I-A, which you'll hear about, the Guided Active Imagination method, she provides helpful ideas, best clinical practices, and home exercises too that are very helpful with personal, physical, and emotional and spiritual healing of traumatic dreams. She's a mind, body, and spiritual psychotherapist, a clinical social worker, a consultant, an international teacher who has decades of experience in dream work. And with that introduction, I want to welcome back Linda Yael Schiller. Hi.
Hi, Todd. Thank you.
It's wonderful to see you again, and I'm really glad you're here. I thought maybe as a way of starting, I'd ask you just to tell us in general how you first got interested in dream work and in trauma work.
Sure. Dream work is something that I came to more directly in my 20s, but as a child, I was always interested in thinking outside the box and exploring ways of knowing, in addition to our Western normative linear style of thinking.
Gotcha.
So I was always interested in mysticism and exploring a lot of mystical and spiritual pathways, both in traditional religious practices and in less traditional, in indigenous, native, pagan practices. So I explored that off and on through my whole adolescence and early 20s. Yeah. And then in my early 20s, after graduating college, I went to Israel and I lived there for 5 years. And while I was there, I developed a relationship with the land itself as a being.
Yes.
And really could feel that sense of presence. And one of the things we talk about in doing dream work is there are sleeping dreams and there are waking dreams. And when you have a heightened consciousness in your waking life, whether you're attending to synchronicities or deja vu or a sense of, I've been here before and I don't know how or why, that's a sense of waking dream. So that kind of woke up to me a lot there. Then when I came back to the States and I came to Boston and finished my graduate work here, a friend of mine from the dance community, my dear friend Eve, moved to Boston, and she said, I'm moving from New York City. I'm done with New York City. There's nothing else I want there. It's too much city for me. But I really miss my dream circle. And she said, I'm going to start a dream circle here in Boston, and would you be in my dream circle? And without missing a beat, I just said yes.
It felt right away.
It felt right.
Yeah.
And then my next question was, what's a dream circle? So something in me knew to say yes before I even quite knew what it was.
Yeah.
But that was the beginning, really.
That's really cool.
And we've been meeting for close to 40 years.
Wow.
A group of 4 women, approximately once a month. And so that's what started me in the path of dream work. And then in my clinical work, as I finished graduate school and worked in the field, more and more of the clients that I worked with had histories of personal trauma, familial trauma, global trauma. So I became trained in a lot of different areas of working with trauma specifically, including EMDR and DBT and a lot of energy psychology methods and a lot of somatic body-based methods.
And that all informed a lot of what your approaches were to dreams.
Exactly. So over the years then these two fields kind of came together and I began interweaving the dream work in my clinical practice and some of the trauma treatment methods that are sort of best practice trauma treatments, both clinically, and started showing up in work with dreams, whether or not there was a trauma history.
All right. Well, if we take our viewers on a sort of a little journey through this very interesting topic of dreams, let me see if we can clarify a few concepts too. For the audience, can you say a little bit the difference between dreams and nightmares, and then the connection between nightmares and trauma?
Sure. So the difference basically between a dream and a nightmare is what is the emotional narrative in the dream story. So we go to sleep, we have a dream, and there's the narrative of the dream. First this happened, then this happened, here's the setting, this is where it took place. So all that is there in the dream.
It's a level.
It's a level. Running alongside that concomitantly is the emotional narrative. How do I feel in the dream? How do I feel in the beginning of the dream? What are my emotions in the middle of the dream? And what am I feeling at the end of the dream and when I wake up? And if, by and large, our emotional state is relaxed, happy, excited, pleasant, it's a dream. If, however, our emotional state is anxious, afraid, deeply grieving, furious, sort of the bigger the emotion, the more that points to a nightmare.
Okay, all right. And if nightmares are connected to trauma too, right?
Right.
A little bit, maybe comment a little bit about that too, you know.
Sure. So not all nightmares, Todd, are connected with trauma.
Right.
There are some sort of normative periods in our growth and development where nightmares are kind of just run par for the course in a way. Kids are little people who everyone's bigger than them and everyone tells them what to do and they have very little control in their life. They often have nightmares because
big things
people
coming after them or whatever. Yeah.
So the monsters under the bed and all that kind of thing, because they feel disempowered in the world because they are, not because something necessarily traumatic happened.
It's just the nature of where they are developmentally.
Right. And then when we're going through hormonal changes in our life, moving into adolescence, pregnant women often report wild and crazy dreams because their hormonal system is doing something very different than it ever did before. Sometimes, yes, that spicy oyster you ate or some food that disagreed with you can give you a nightmare. So all those things are also nightmares, but the nightmares that are the most terrifying, the nightmares that linger and haunt your day as well as your night, the nightmares that are repetitive and go round and round and come back and back, very, very often those are connected with a history of trauma that has not yet been fully resolved or fully metabolized.
Yes.
And then the nightmares are coming up sort of as an SOS from our unconscious to say, hello, there's something you haven't worked out yet. There's something you're not at peace with yet. There's something you have to do differently in order to put this nightmare to rest or to bed, if you will.
Good way to frame it too. And that's some of the work that you want to be able to accomplish for healing.
That's right.
One of the things about the PTSD in general, and I'm sure in the nightmares too, there's a concept that I want our audience to hear you talk about a little, because it is an important part of one of the major things that can happen in trauma, and that's dissociation.
Right.
I wonder if you could just give them a little sense of how we look at that.
That's good. Right, so actually I have a whole chapter in the book that discusses dissociation because
Yes.
A, it's so important in terms of understanding trauma, and B, it's so important in terms of working with dream work. So dissociation is one of the common sequelae of a PTS response, of a post-traumatic stress response. And I'm not saying a PTSD response, because the D stands for the word disorder. Right? And we know, from a professional standpoint, that for something to get classified as a disorder, we have to be struggling with it for 6 months or more before, the DSM will say, okay, now we count that as a disorder. So people can have traumatic events in their life, and as long as they're metabolizing them and working them through and being less and less affected, it doesn't generate into a full disorder. So that's really important for the listeners to know, or the viewers, that not all traumatic events will cause you to have PTSD
Definitely
afterwards.
not. Right.
So, because in this day and age, a lot of people are sort of throwing around the language, PTSD this, PTSD that, and we want to make sure we're differentiating between what is a normal or normative response to an upsetting and traumatic situation and what has sort of morphed or generated into something that's become a life events that are disrupting your life, which would be the disorder. Excuse me. So when we have traumatic events in our life, particularly those that are chronic or ongoing, that we have a variety of responses to those events. And the classic ones are the fight, flight, or freeze response. So in the face of danger, we are hardwired to try to be safe in whatever way we can. And so if we're, Peter Levine, who wrote Waking the Tiger, who does somatic experiencing, does a lot of talking about this in both that book and his subsequent books, and he uses examples from animals in the wild. So an animal in the wild, there's prey and there's predator, but animals don't get PTSD, right? And this is how Peter explains it. Some animals, if they're being attacked, can successfully run away and outrun their attacker. Some animals can turn and fight their attacker, and if they're successful in either killing or fighting off their attacker, then they're safe. If those two strategies don't work for this particular prey and this particular predator, another two strategies are the freeze, where the animal stops dead in its tracks and doesn't move. Because, for example, a hawk tracks movement, right? So if the squirrel or the rabbit freezes perfectly still, the hawk might not be able to see them. And then the hawk goes away. When the hawk then goes away, the squirrel or the rabbit will get up, sort of shake itself off, and go hopping away on its bunny business and does not develop PTSD. And that's significant because what prevents animals, at least in part, from getting the PTSD is this shaking it off.
Yes.
So if we as humans are able to shake off a traumatic or potentially dangerous event, then we're not going to develop it either. If we can't, if we stay stuck in the frozen state and we're not sure or we don't believe that the danger has passed, our system might kick into another type of protective mechanism, which is where the dissociation comes in. So dissociation, in a nutshell, is when you split time and space, where you're in one spot and your mind is in another spot. And it gives you the illusion of safety, and it's actually a brilliant strategy on the parts of our minds to keep us from being overwhelmed by the situation we're in at the moment. So someone, for example, a child is living in an abusive home environment and they can't get out of the abusive home environment. What they unconsciously learn to do sometimes is go away in their mind. Their body is still there in that household, but their mind is on the beach or their mind is playing with their dog, and they've made a split between what's happening on the ground, so to speak, and what's happening in their mind. And that's the essence of dissociation, that body-mind split.
That's very helpful. Nice explanation, and you can also see how it can be a coping mechanism for sure.
Right.
Depending on how long it lasts and what happens.
Exactly, exactly. If people get past it and are able to reintegrate themselves, it was a coping mechanism that worked during the traumatic events. If the person stays fragmented into parts, that's when it becomes a problem. And there is such a thing as normative dissociation as well, that we all experience at certain times, like highway hypnosis, for example.
You're driving
That's
along.
normative dissociation. Or you're sitting in a class or a lecture and all of a sudden you realize, I haven't heard a thing the professor's been saying for the last 10 minutes. Right. That's a form of dissociation that has nothing to do with trauma.
Yeah.
But sometimes it does have to do with trauma. If people are walking through the world and not feeling safe in their bodies and their environment, their system will kick over into this dissociative place. And at the extreme end of the spectrum of dissociation, we have what used to be called multiple personality disorder and now is called dissociative identity disorder, where there's actually the fragmented parts are so separated that they're not even aware of each other.
Yes, that makes sense. Okay, and when you start to try to analyze a dream or work on helping a person make something constructive, positive from it, in your, I think this was also in your first book, but you talk about the Pardis method.
Yeah.
And I wanted people to hear how you actually go about when you're sitting with somebody trying to use it, and maybe if you can weave an example in, which is one of the wonderful things you do in your book.
Oh, thank you so much. Sure. So let me back up 1 second just to connect the dissociation and the dream work, because I didn't quite connect all the dots, I think.
Go for it.
So sometimes in our dreams, previously separated out events reoccur. So things we might have forgotten, memories that might have been sort of buried in our unconscious, can show up again in our dream life, either in instant replay, so to speak, of what actually happened, or in symbol and metaphor. So that's the connection.
Good point.
And I want to caution any dream workers or any clinicians working with your clients, we never want to assume that something in a dream is a memory that has emerged. If we know our client has a history of trauma, we want to hold the possibility that something in their dreams and nightmares may be reflecting the trauma, but we don't want to jump to conclusions, because the true meaning of any dream is always in the mind of the dreamer, him or herself.
I think that's an excellent point. We're going to be talking about this more, but I think it also increases the safety of the person when your response is, this is a hypothesis, not that I know that this is what that is.
Exactly. And what you just said so beautifully, Todd, that is the premise on which we do dream work anyway. I don't come in and say, I'm telling you what your dream means. Yeah. I'm not interpreting your dream. We don't even use that word, interpretation.
Yeah.
I'm a member of IASD, which is the International Association for the Study of Dreams. Big shout out, it's a wonderful organization.
Good to know.
And we learned from one of our teachers, Jeremy Taylor, not to project our own associations onto someone else. Rather, we can offer, possibilities. And we might say, if this were my dream, I might be wondering about this, or I might be paying attention to this.
Yes.
Yeah. Or I'm wondering about this, or this is calling my attention. What's it like for you?
And to be guided by the person's response to that is a sign of respect and connection in the relationship when you're trying to help somebody.
Right, right. So the same principles hold in doing dream work that we would do in any kind of helping clinical work. That's right.
And with the Pardis method, a little bit more about that, I'd like to hear.
Sure. So the Pardis method is designed to help us look at the many layers of potential meaning in a dream. And what we know about a dream is that it doesn't mean just one thing. It's not one and done. It means this, I'm done. There can be many simultaneously true understandings and layers of the dream. And I created a method based on the Pardis, and Pardis is a Hebrew word. It means orchard, and it's often used as an allegory for the Garden of Eden. It's also the way we read the sacred literature when we're reading Torah, we're reading Tanakh, we're reading other sacred books. it's an acronym, and there are 4 layers in the acronym. The P stands for the word pshat, which means simple. So that's the storyline
Narrative.
in and of itself, the narrative of what's going on in the text we're reading or in the dream.
Okay.
So if you tell me a dream and you say, I'm walking down the street, I cross the street, I see a dog on the other side, boom, that's the pshat level, that's just the narrative. The second level, the R is for the word remez, and remez means hint or hinted at. So this layer is the first things that the dream seems to point us toward or hint at, our first associations to the dream. Oh, I was walking down Broadway in my dream, and that's because I know we're planning a trip to New York to see a Broadway play, right? So Broadway was on my mind. I made that connection. That's a hint from your dream.
Mm-hmm.
It's not super in depth, but it's not contained in the dream itself.
I hear you.
It's your first association.
So it's an inference you've drawn from what your dream.
Right, and this can have a metaphor, it can have a play on words, it can have a pun,
Right.
it can have just something that jogs your memory a little bit. The next layer, D, is from the word drash, which comes from the Hebrew word lidrosh, which means to chase after or to pursue.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the layer where we do the deep dream work, where we use multiple methods of dream work to try to peel back the layers of the dream onion to find the ever deepening explanations and associations and pieces of information the dream might contain. And here we might use the Gestalt method of dream work, where you become every character in your dream or even every object in your dream. We might use dream rehearsal therapy, where when the dream ends, we create a new ending and then we rehearse it. I often tell my dreamers, particularly if they've had a bad dream or a nightmare, I say, well, this isn't where the dream necessarily ended. This is
Right.
just where you woke up.
There's a difference.
There's a difference. So let's dream it forward. So what happens
love it.
next?
That's a
And what
good
happens
method.
next? Yeah. So, and then there's a number of different ways of doing dream work. There's lucid dreaming, there's the Gaia method, there's focusing, there's a lot of somatic dream theater and dream body methods of working. So that's the layer we would do all that stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the final layer is the S, or the Sod, which means the secret in English. And that's our mystical, our transpersonal layer. And this is the layer where we not only can be dreaming for ourselves, we can be dreaming for other people, we can be dreaming for the world, we can be dreaming for the land. We can have connections with other space, other times, other dimensions, connect with divine resources, connect with departed relatives who have passed. So in this final layer, we get to time and space travel and connect with
So interesting.
spiritual resources.
And I'm sure that's fascinating when you're working with someone around that issue too.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the Gaia method. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that, because that's one of the interesting chapters in the book too, and a little bit of what that stands for, and a little bit of how you use it.
Great. So the Gaia method, again, is an acronym for Guided Active Imagination Approach, GAIA. And I created this specifically to work with nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
And it's based on 2 bodies of work. One is on Jungian style active imagination, where we bring our waking imagination, if you will, or our waking consciousness to our unconscious processes, including our dreams, to help sort them out and get more information. So we actively engage and go back inside the dream itself and muck around and noodle around and talk to the dream characters or do different things in the dream and waking life than actually happened. So this is the premise of Jung's active imagination. And then the other pillar on which the Gaia method is based is best practice trauma treatments. So what makes this method sort of unique and stand out from some of the other dream work methods is this attention to slow, careful, safe dream work. I don't know about you, Todd, but I have had people come to me with a nightmare who had consulted with someone else. And one person, who was a professional therapist actually, who came to me and she said, I talked with my consultants about my nightmare, or my friends, and they said, oh my God, I think you're having a psychotic break. I think you should go to the hospital.
Oh, goodness.
And I said, wow, that's a pretty big leap to make
Yes.
there. You know, would you like to tell me your dream? Which is the first question I ask. I'm not
Yes,
assuming.
permission. It's permission.
Yeah, I get permission. Do you want to tell me your dream? And then do you want to work on it together and see if there's a different way of understanding that dream? And she said yes, and she said yes. So she told me the dream, and we did some work on it using the Gaia method, and I was very, very sure she was not having a psychotic break.
Yes.
Because by the time we finished unpacking the dream, and that's a Jungian phrase, to unpack the dream, it was very clear that there was sort of metaphor and symbol there, as opposed to losing touch with reality.
Yeah. Interesting.
So we were very careful in the Gaia method. There are 3 steps. There's step 1, and then there's the bridge, and then there's step 2. So in step 1, borrowing a page from, as we were talking about before
EMDR.
we started, from EMDR, we do resource installation first. We help the dreamer to gather around anything he or she may need to feel safe, grounded, comfortable, and protected before going into the nightmare and beginning to interact with the dream characters, because we don't want to re-traumatize somebody, and
That's right.
sometimes those dreams are really scary.
Absolutely.
And so we want to make sure the person feels safe. So we create safe place imagery, we gather their posse of friends, family, pets, imaginary characters, departed relatives, mystical images. We get objects if someone wants to bring their invisibility cloak, or if somebody wants to bring their lightsaber, by all means bring it with. One young woman I worked with said, I'm going to bring my cell phone with me before we work on the dream, because that way if I get in trouble I can always call someone. And she was really smart. She was a millennial. She said, and I'm bringing my portable charger. Which I thought was just terrific. So she was really going to make sure she didn't run out of juice or charge to go into the dream. And what's so beautiful about that, that image for her and that safety object was it was a way she could stay connected,
Yes.
right? So that's one of the things is we don't have to do the scary work by ourselves.
I think that you're making such an important point. I just want to emphasize, especially with people I've worked with too, the same thing, that when you do the kind of work like that you just described, you're empowering the person to be creative and tell you a lot of what helps them feel safe. What are their safety images? What are the objects? I remember one person I worked with where she was really dealing with a very difficult issue, and she said, I need something to feel safe. And I asked her if she had any images in her head, and she said, I'm going to work on it. And next week she came in and put this little sculpture of a Native American older woman, wiser woman, and she said, she's with me. So it was beautiful, and it really helped her. I love that you emphasize that in the book, and now too, that safety is such a central thing, and there's no rush to try to rush the person. The timing has to be theirs, and that's another thing. You slow time down when you ask what kind of things will make you safe. And I find I'm always amazed by the creative things that people think of that are idiosyncratic for them, what makes them feel safe, and what a good thing for them to know as they approach something that can be so scary.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's no rush. Chances are really high that the person's been dealing with this nightmare or this difficult event in their life for a long time before they sat down with us. So we can take our time, make sure that they have a safe place, they feel safe inside and outside. And I love the example that you just gave of the woman who brought this Native American wise elder.
It was so telling.
It's so powerful because she, in her wisdom, did a number of things. First of all, she didn't rush. She said, I'm going to think about it. I'm not going to jump to something.
And she needed to be given that time. That's the message to her. You're in control here. This isn't going to be like the situation that traumatized you, where you felt out of control.
Exactly. And that's one of the points of doing dream work and of the Gaia method. The control, the power, the pacing belongs with the dreamer. And one of the styles of working nowadays in IFS, internal family systems, talks about parts. And so I always tell people, we're only going to go as fast as the slowest part of you is comfortable and can keep up. So you really gave her permission for that slower part to take some time to think. And then in her wisdom, what she did, she not only brought a wise elder with her.
Yes.
She brought an actual statue of a wise elder.
Yes.
So she both had the concrete object and the internalized image, which covers, 2 planes of reality at once then. So those transitional objects that you can actually hold in your hand are wonderful safety mechanism. And I learned a million years ago from, the name is going to come to me, but from someone called the associational cue for the present, or for comfort and safety, which literally is finding something that's an associational cue that ideally you can touch, that lets you know when I look at my ring, or when I look at this necklace, which was my mom's, it's like I'm immediately connected to her. Or when I look at my wedding ring, I say, I'm immediately connected with my husband. And that's an associational cue that's very solid and concrete physically and internally as well. So we carry those cues with us in the first part of doing the Gaia method before we go into the dream itself.
It's interesting. I even think of when you have a young child that's having trouble going to sleep, or you're going out and there's a babysitter, and they're really having separation anxiety, and so I've had parents that put a picture of themselves right in the crib, or an object that is associated with them and their love and the connection.
That's wonderful.
So safety, we cannot overemphasize the process of the creative piece of really helping the person figure out what is going to help them feel safe enough to approach this work.
Right. That's right. So I'm going to go on to talk about the other 2 pieces in the
go
Gaia
right
method. But I just want to say that, with kids and parents going away, for years, when my daughter was little and we would go away, she would sleep with a nightshirt of mine. So very literal and concrete. You had, the pheromones of mommy.
Yes. It's wonderful.
It was great. It was
a great
brilliant.
example.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. So once we've got that all, and before going on, I always ask the person, is there anything else? Is there anything else you need to be perfectly safe? Check and see. And also check to be sure that the people or the objects you have are truly safe and there's no little part of them that gives you cause for pause. So if you invited, Aunt Susan to be in your posse, check to be sure that there's nothing about Aunt Susan that makes you feel uncomfortable or unsafe in any way. And if there is, out she goes, and let's find somebody that you can just say, nope, this person is fine.
I also really, what I love about that and the whole concept of parts, I know that's a whole method, but I find it really helpful because so many times you may have somebody that is really dealing with things in a black or white thinking way, and there's nothing in between, and they even do that to themselves. I'm defined by this particular approach, and when you talk about parts, you're inviting them to explore that they are actually a rich human being with many different parts.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. So that's another piece I bring into the work is the IFS piece as well as the EMDR and the energy
Tell
psychology.
them a little about EMDR. I know it's complicated, but just because they probably don't even know what that stands for.
Absolutely. No, I forgot. I'm talking to another therapist here who knows what it is.
So please, we got to let them.
EMDR, the letters, again, all these, alphabet soup stands for eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. And it is an integrated body-mind method of working that helps people to process or reprocess actually traumatic events that happened to them that were more than their system could handle processing at the time. And through a combination of a cognitive protocol with very clear steps, and the eye movements is a movement where you follow with your eyes going right, left across the span of your eyes. It allows you to engage both sides of your brain. So you're engaging both right brain and left brain and crossing midline, which seems to be very, very important in healing, to integrate our rational, linear, left-sided way of gaining knowledge and information and our creative, spiritual, less linear right side, so that when we are crossing midline and connecting both sides of our brain, through something like these EMs, these eye movements, we're allowing ourselves to use a fuller set of resources than we otherwise would have had access to. So EMDR is something you need to be trained in specifically.
Yes.
It's not something I can't say, go try this at home. So there are wonderful training programs from Amidria that if people are interested, they can learn to become an EMDR practitioner.
But it's good for our audience to hear that the structure of the brain even, there's this whole other level of,
that's right.
And that you talk about that a lot in your book too, which is very helpful, and lots of research and a lot of positive research in terms of how helpful that can be.
Right now, EMDR is up there in terms of one of the top 2 or 3 best practice trauma treatment methods that there are. They use it in the VA.
Yes.
Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score. He's here in the Boston area. He's a big fan and proponent of EMDR. And opportunity to say, later on this week, I'm going to be at the Belmont Bookstore on Thursday.
I'm glad you mentioned
7 o'clock. And my colleague, Debbie Korn, who is a wonderful, wonderful EMDR practitioner, is going to be with me in conversation. So we're going to be talking about this live at the bookstore. It will be a masked event, so you're welcome to come if you are available
Right in
Thursday
Belmont
at
Center,
7.
right?
Right in Belmont Center. Yeah, it's a lovely bookstore.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to move to something that I think in your book, you have so many helpful, specific suggestions for people that are trying to just come to grips with the fact that they're dreaming and that are helpful, some of which we've mentioned. So I'm just going to focus on a few.
Sure.
But I would like to hear your take on this, because I think people can walk away with some concrete things that they can even do in terms of the dreams they're having right now for themselves. So one was just very basically writing dreams down and keeping a diary. I want to get your take on the importance of that.
Yeah. Keeping a dream journal is one of the best ways to A, remember your dreams, and then B, to be able to work with them, whether it's for entertainment and fun, or for curiosity and to figure things out, or to resolve and deal with scary nightmares or traumatic events that have happened that are showing up in your dreams.
Yes.
Because we all dream every night, 5 to 7 times. We have REM cycles, but we don't usually remember our dreams very well because we wake up and poof, they're gone like a wisp of smoke. So we have to anchor them down in something more concrete than just our thinking process. So as much as possible to write down even a few words, but as much as you can about your dream as soon as possible after you wake up.
I was just thinking that even down to the level of you're starting to wake up, if you have that dream journal by your bed and you keep your eyes closed and then you start writing, you probably get a little bit more of it that you might remember.
Absolutely. If you can write with your eyes closed before getting all the way out of your sleeping...
Make some strange words.
Absolutely do that. That's the hypnopompic or the hypnagogic zones on either side of the dream. But if you jumped out of bed, you needed to run to the bathroom, you forgot whatever, you're in the shower, and you go, I had a dream, but I can't remember it. By all means, if you have a few minutes, go back to bed and lay down again. And put your body in the same position that it was in when you were sleeping and having the dream. And very, very often, you will engage what's called positional memory and recapture your dream that way. And then you can write it down.
That's really
So that's one of my favorite tricks, if you will, for recapturing a dream that I thought I might have lost if I got up too fast.
That's very interesting. One of the other interesting, little different, but uses of that positional, a lot of times if I'm talking to somebody about how to empower themselves and how to center their body and ground themselves, I say also change the position in your chair, if you're sitting in your chair, as if your body is telling you, I'm going to take a different viewpoint of what I'm dealing with.
That's beautiful.
Because metaphors are powerful and helpful. The body can help us. You also have a thing about creating a bubble of light for
Yeah.
increasing safety and healing and protection. Just a little bit about
Sure.
that too. I love these ideas. They're very practical and so helpful.
Thank you. I tell people there are 3 places you can intervene to help yourself feel safe and comfortable in your dream: before, during, and after. So the bubble of light is before you go to sleep at night.
Yes.
Engage in connecting with whoever and whatever you feel divine protection is, and create a bubble of light around you, whether it's with Archangel Michael, or whether it's with a favorite saint, or whether it's with Shekhinah, the feminine presence of God, or the force, or the universe, or
Yes.
whatever your sense of something larger than yourself is, and put that around you as a healing protective boundary, and make sure you put it in just the right colors for you. It might be white, it could be blue, it could be gold. There's no right or wrong. It could be a rainbow of all different colors. I'll give you an example. It just made me think of it. I was doing some dream work with a colleague of mine who had this really scary dream that had been a reoccurring dream about an evil, dark man, a vampire,
Yes.
who was chasing him. And this man had been chasing him off and on for years. So we did a whole bunch of different dream work one day. And actually, I wrote about it. That's one of the stories in the book. But that night, when I went to sleep, I had a dream about an evil, scary, dark man chasing me. And it's like, so in my dream, I was able to become lucid, which means you are aware that you're dreaming while you're asleep.
Yes, a lucid dream.
And I knew that this scary man was not mine, because I was familiar enough with my dream posse, my dream characters, my dream themes to know this is not something that I would be dreaming enough about. I never have before. I said, this is Jason's dream. So what I did in my dream is I kept telling that dream guy to go. I said, you're not supposed to be in my dream, go away. And he wasn't listening. And finally, what I did is, in my dream, I grabbed my talit, my talis, my prayer shawl, and I have a rainbow prayer shawl. And I wrapped myself in my rainbow prayer shawl of light. And then I said, now be gone. And he left. And that was it. And in the morning when I woke up, I wrote this all down. And I said, oh, I have to tell Jason. And so I told Jason that I had a dream about his dream.
Yes.
And he was a little nervous at first, said, oh my God, I hope it's not catching. I hope I didn't contaminate you with my bad dream. I said, no, not to worry. I'm fine, but I want to offer you, if you'd like to use my prayer shawl, you're welcome to.
That's so good.
So it was really a fun blend of different types of dreaming, and then using this idea of the bubble of light, and in this case wrapping myself in a rainbow of something out for divine protection.
It makes the point, which is one of the really powerful things about your book, that something that is so scary you can turn into something where you are empowered and you can figure out something that protects you, something that you can do that fits. And it's very individual.
Right.
Your prayer shawl could be, God knows, it could be like in Star Wars, the Force is with me.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I love it.
Thanks.
You also have Just Say No, and you're not talking about Nancy Reagan.
I'm not talking about Nancy Raven. So before going to sleep at night, you've put your bubble of light around you. And if you are aware that you've been having scary dreams and nightmares, before you go to sleep, talk to your dream guide. And as I said in the book, just say no. Shut the door, close the portal, say no, I will not let anything through in this night unless it is in my highest good and best interest, or in the service of my healing, or in such a titrated amount that I can handle it and tolerate it, but not too much.
You're taking control, and you are making, in a sense, an affirmation of
That's
the
right.
kind. And it's powerful.
Yeah.
And you can do that. This is a can-do book. That's what I love, and it's
Thank
coming
you.
out as we talk.
Yeah.
You also talked about using the power of smell, taste, and other senses, like plants or tea or different kinds of things. And again, that might be before you go to sleep, right?
Right. So both before and then while you're asleep as well. So whatever it is in your life, or invite other things if you don't have enough, that help you feel relaxed, calm, peaceful, protected. It might be a nice cup of chamomile tea, and we know chamomile is a mild soporific, and
Yes,
it's kind of
yeah.
just as relaxing. It might be that beautiful flowers feed, your mind's eye with their beauty, and they might have a scent to them. So maybe you put some flowers or a plant next to your bed. It might be that you like aromatherapy, and you can light your aromatherapy candle or machine before you go to sleep. So there are many, many ways we can invite feelings of calm and safety into our room, visually, physically. Do you have a favorite set of pajamas that you wear that is the coziest?
Too.
Could be music, right? Use any and all of your senses
Yes.
to feel safe, calm, and protected before you go to sleep. And then some of them, like the scent or the music, will continue through your sleeping state as well,
Yeah.
to guard you and soothe you while you're asleep.
Well, it's I like that, and I think it's so good for people to know that they have these kind of options, that there are so many things, and they can figure, and even they can do some work and empower themselves in thinking about how do I want to set my environment for sleeping?
That's right.
And what kind of intentions do I want to set?
That's right.
You really make those points. People, when they read it, I think it will encourage people if they read it, that there's a lot you can do. You may not have thought these things would matter, but there's enough evidence from people
Right.
that we talk to that it does matter.
Yeah.
I want to give you a chance also to talk about something that is one of the strengths of the book, and I think, is the importance of spirituality in your healing work too. Just a comment so people can see that that's a part of what you weigh, and that's a level that you're also, and it depends on the person where they'll go with you or not.
Right, thank you. Yeah, it's something that I think is really critical, and it's often left out of the training for medical, mental health
agree.
professionals,
I agree.
that in my opinion, not enough attention is given to that incredibly powerful resource in our life. And as a matter of fact, when there has been a big trauma, it's often described as a soul-shattering experience, where it really can cut to the quick of our belief systems and our spirit, and people feel crushed not only in their mind or their body, but in their spirit as well. So to be able to engage and offer options and opportunities for healing at that level is going to be a fuller and more complete healing than otherwise. And again, I'm not here to impose any religious or spiritual tradition.
It's not a particular spirituality,
Right.
yeah.
But what is it that we can help you find that allows you to feel there's something out there and in there, right?
Both.
Both the external and the indwelling sense of presence, love, peacefulness that is your birthright. Right. So I tell everyone, this is your birthright. It's not that you don't have it. You might have lost it. You might have buried it, but you can reclaim it. And in shamanic tradition, actually, they talk about soul retrieval and do a variety of different rituals and ceremonies to bring back home the soul that might have gotten split off from the body during upsetting and traumatic events. And so I see as part of our role as healers to provide an opportunity to do various forms of soul retrieval to sort of reunite the body and the spirit to be a unified and whole being.
I love that, and it is often neglected, and just personal experience with working with people. When you see you're working with the person and you see that all of a sudden there is something going on where they're reclaiming their sense of self and their connection to something bigger than themselves. Their body language changes, their physical appearance changes. So it's a very abstract concept, and when we're talking about it here, it may be hard for people to imagine that this level is so powerful. But it's connected to healing, and as you said, it adds a very huge, larger dimension to the healing. You know,
it's not infrequent. Two points on that. One is, when I'm sitting with someone doing dream work or doing therapy with someone, I'm not only listening, but I'm watching. I'm paying attention to your body language, to your facial expressions, to
Your
what's
eyes,
going on, to
all
your
kinds
eyes.
of things, yes.
And I see the difference in someone's posture or face or the light in their eyes. And what I might do, frequently do, is I tell them, here's what I see. Are you noticing that
Yes.
from the inside? And usually, almost always, they're so delighted that the felt sense of their feeling better, whatever that means, is actually showing up
Yes.
on the outside.
It's
And then to
real.
have that
It is
mirrored
real.
back
It
to
happens.
them
It really happens.
is just wonderful.
Yeah.
And in dream work, I use embodied dream work as well to help with the nightmares. And just like you were saying, asking someone to shift their position, we will often do acting out of a dream with dream theater, whether it's just the two of us, if I'm sitting with one person, or when I'm working with groups of people with dream circles,
Yes.
I'll do a whole big dream psychodrama. And we physically move our bodies and put our bodies in different positions. And if someone, for example, is feeling very frightened in their dream, and I might say, so put your body in a posture, in a position. What would your body look like if it was frightened right
I
now?
see.
So often someone will do something like kind of crouch down maybe, or put their hands over their head, or bury their face, some body posture like that. I say, okay, and now I want you to imagine, what does your body look like if in the dream you were feeling safe, strong, comfortable, and empowered, and do that with your body. And I do it along with them. I don't make someone perform for me.
You model it
so
as
I
well,
will do
and join them.
the posture like this, and then if they're, if the healing open posture, I'll get up and I'll do it with them. And the physicality of moving the energy through the body is another way of doing this deep dream work that moves us body, mind, and spirit. And they'll feel the difference as well.
Love it. Awesome. It makes so much sense. One of the things that I love about this book, and there are many, is that how you integrate your own personal experience in your life as a therapist also, and when you're discussing the PTS dreams. And I'd love to, and you also have all exercises, that's the other thing. Those are the two things that make this such a friendly book. And tell me a little bit about how that came about in terms of your deciding to write about this and stuff.
Oh, thank you. I think it's just my style.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
part that when I first started writing anything, back when I was professor at Boston University School of Social Work for years, and I did a lot of scholarly writing
Yeah.
for journals and
Sure.
book chapters. So I had a sort of a scholarly style. And then the next piece of writing I did was blogging, because when my daughter was too young, I knew I had something to say
Yeah.
about dream work, and she was too young, I didn't have the time, so I started blogging. But then when I started writing the first book, Modern Dream Work, I had a consultant who told me, you do really good at short form writing. You've got to learn how to do long form writing. That's a whole different, and he advised me, put yourself in the story, tell the story.
Yes.
This is for all the writers out there. I was taught this. Tell
Yes.
the story, really describe it, flesh out the details, and I kind of took it to heart. And with the first book, he did a lot of editing with me in the beginning, and by the end, he said, well, now I think you've graduated from long form writing 101 to graduate school, which was very sweet. And with the second book, when I wrote up the proposal and I put a few chapters, and I said, hey, would you look this over before I submit it to Llewellyn? He looked it over and he said, aside from a few misplaced commas and things, I think you're good to go. So I had
Yes.
developed a style, I think, where, and part of the way I work with people is I work from myself, and the importance of connection and
Yes.
being a real person is part of my practice and my
So
philosophy.
how you write is also how you do therapy. It's a value and a philosophy of life and a way of being.
Oh, thank you for articulating that better than I did.
Well,
Yeah.
I got it reading the book because
Yeah.
what you do is you invite the reader in to your world and your thoughts and also you're caring for them, even by how you do that. And
Thank
that's
you.
a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
In the last couple minutes, I
Yeah.
just want to ask you, talk a little bit about, you mentioned that you're going to be doing this event. I would just want to, again, the date so people will hear it, because this show may be seen after after you do the event. So I want to, if they're watching, I hope they'll get there in time.
I don't know if anybody watches live now, but it's this Thursday, is the local book launch at Belmont Bookstore
Okay.
at 7 o'clock. So I think your show's not airing until
Yeah.
after this Thursday.
Yeah, so
but
they probably won't.
That's
but,
okay.
But how about some websites or things that you think are good ways for people to contact you if they want to pursue stuff with you too?
Great, thank you. So I have websites for each of my books. I have www.ptsdreams.com for
Right.
this book. And then I have for the first book, Modern Dreamwork, moderndreamwork.com. And then I have my own personal website, LindaYaelSchiller.com, which is my, sort of tells you all about my practice and the various things I do in various modalities.
That's great.
Yeah.
People will be seeing that as you speak too. So
Okay.
that I would really recommend that. Last thing, minute or so on it, is the importance of groups, the dream groups, a little bit. If you could say a couple
Sure.
words, I'll have to cut that off. But
Yeah, I see we have just a few minutes
Yes.
left. I love my dream groups, and we all have blind spots. We can't see the back of our own heads without two mirrors, right? One in the front and one in the back. So when
Yes.
you're working with other people, at least one other person, there's a Freudian slip, purple, that's interesting.
Yeah.
At least one other person, you get one perspective. But when you're working with a group of people, you get multiple perspectives on your dream, things that you would not have thought of because we all have blind spots.
and it also reflects the reality of how complex the layers are of different ways of analyzing things,
Exactly.
looking at things.
That's right. Everyone will have a little bit of a different perspective, which is so rich. And one of the beauties of dream groups then is that not only will you get advantage of having other people's perspectives on your dream, when you hear other people's dreams, you can get a hit or a resonance and a learning from other people's dreams as well. So among other things that I do is I facilitate dream circles, and I've helped jumpstart. So if people are listening and they're interested and you say, hey, this sounds really good, I can help people jumpstart a dream circle, come in and facilitate for 4 to 6 sessions, and then give you the tools to go off on your own
Yes.
after that.
Well, as I know I mentioned this before, but one of the things that I just really love about the book and about what your work is again that there are some topics that people don't want to talk about because they're so uncomfortable, and they're connected with so much anxiety and fear and nightmares and trauma are. But your book not only talks about the importance of safety, but it gives people a lot of practical ideas. It lets them know they're not alone too,
Right.
and they can reach out in so many ways, and that's beautiful.
Thank you.
You have been just as wonderful as I thought you would be after the first time,
Thank
and I'm
you.
so glad that you came back.
Oh, thank you. It was my pleasure. And that really is my philosophy of the work, is in ADEP, which is a way of, a style of doing clinical work. The philosophy is we're all hardwired for healing. We're not
That's a
meant
good point.
to stay in pain or traumatized.
That is a great place to stop. I want to thank you again so much, Linda, for coming. And I'd like to thank our audience for watching. And I hope that this was interesting for you. And I hope you'll join us again soon on another sunny side of the street. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Todd.
Great.
Anticipate potential delays for the morning commute. In other news, a recent government report on prescription drug pricing points to corporate
Freedom of the press is about your right to know.
Create offenses,
What are you talking about, man? Look at his stats.
Clark sheer athleticism.
It's about your right to be informed. Your right to access all types of information keeps us free as a nation.
No.
Today, there are real threats to press freedom
Reaching residential areas by...
and your right to know about the world around us.
Look,
Some threats are obvious, some are easy to miss, but they all put our way of life at risk. We must defend against all of these threats, no matter what kind of news is important to you.
Justified putting American troops in harm's way?
That's a great question.
We must protect our right to know before it's too late. Understand the threats. ProtectPressFreedom.org.
Meet Norm. He lives with anxiety, but with the help of this latest innovation from Be Normal, he can be normal, just like everyone else. With the swipe of a finger, you can project happiness, confidence, machismo. Why settle for being real when you can be normal? The Normal Maker. New from Be Normal. This item doesn't really work because there's no such thing as normal. We're all different. What we like, how our brains work. In fact, 1 in 5 of us live with mental illness. Don't filter who you are. Start by talking to someone you trust. And remember, there is no normal.